morning and welcome to the August-September meeting of the Mississippi Mortgage Bankers Association. For ones who don't know me, my name is Matt Wilson, the current board president. I'm excited for this meeting for several different reasons. One, this will be the first time in a while that we've all come together as a state. Whether it's through Zoom or in person, anytime that we can all come together as a state organization, it's always a special treat. The second reason is we have opened this meeting not only to the entire state, but also to our referral partners, our center of influences, our closing attorneys, any person that has any type of part of the mortgage process. We thank them for their time and joining us today. And then lastly, our guests. One of the greatest assets that we have as an organization is the mutual beneficial working relationship that we have with our congressional delegation from Mississippi. And that includes our speaker today. Congressman Michael Guest is serving his first term as a U.S. representative for Mississippi's 3rd Congressional District. Congressman Guest is a member of the Committee of Homeland Security, the Committee of Foreign Affairs, and the Committee of Ethics. Congressman Guest is married to the former Haley Kennedy of Brandon, and they have 2 sons, Kennedy and Patton. He and his family are members of Brandon's Baptist Church, where Congressman Guest serves as a Sunday school teacher and a deacon. It is with great excitement that I introduce to you today our Congressman, the Honorable Michael Guest.
Matt, thank you so much. And to everyone who's on today's call, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to allow me the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that we have been doing in Washington, some of the things that we're possibly looking forward toward in the remainder of the year. I wanted to give a special recognition to one of your members, my former college roommate and great high school friend, Greg Shiles. Greg and I have known each other since our early teenage years. And so anything Greg tells you about me is probably not true. So please don't ask him any stories about things that we did back. And thank goodness anything that we did happened before the days of cell phones and social media. So anything that we did that we probably shouldn't have, hopefully has long been forgotten. But do want to kind of just walk through what has happened this year and again talk a little bit about some of the things that we will be doing between now and the end of the year. You know, it seems like it was a lifetime ago where we actually lived pre-COVID, but you know, back in January and February of this year, as we were in Congress, you know, we were looking at issues, particularly at the end of 2019, the House voted along partisan lines to return articles of impeachment against the president. Then early in the year, we saw the Senate take up those articles of impeachment. And then right there at the end of February, we saw the Senate return a not guilty verdict against the president. It looked as things were kind of getting back to some sense of normalcy, if you will. And then in March, we had the onset of COVID-19. And so with the onset of COVID-19, we started to see a shutdown of our economy as we were encouraging people to stay home, as many governors were closing businesses or putting restrictions on businesses. And so one thing that we as Congress did is we started looking at passing certain pieces of legislation that would be COVID related. There were a series of bills, but those bills really kind of accumulated or came together with the CARES Act. And I know your members are familiar with the CARES Act. It was roughly a $3 trillion package, and it was multifaceted. And I kind of break that down into 5 main things we as Congress were attempting to accomplish through the CARES Act. First, we were looking at trying to protect individuals who we knew were going to lose their job, at least on a temporary basis, because of the shutdown of the economy. We knew that many businesses were going to be forced to close their doors to try to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, to try to make sure that we were not overwhelming our healthcare system. And that we were going to have individuals who were going to be filing for unemployment for probably the first time in their entire life. And so we wanted to make sure that during this transitional period, till the economy was able to begin to reopen again, that those individuals would have the financial resources to pay rent, to pay mortgage, to feed their family, to pay their utilities. And so Congress agreed to put an additional $600 of federal unemployment benefits in addition to any dollars that were being paid out by the state. We set a deadline as to when those benefits would expire. We know now that those benefits have in fact expired. But what we believe is that money helped individuals, particularly when we were at the height of unemployment. Before COVID started, our unemployment was as far as the unemployment rate was the best that we had seen in 50 years. We were at 3.5% unemployment in February. Then COVID hits, and we quickly see a spike in April. We saw the unemployment rate reach 14.7%. So we added just a huge number of individuals in a very brief period of time. Since then, we have seen the gradual decline in those numbers. The rate for July, I think, is 10.2%. So we saw 14.7. Now we're down to 10.2. I'm hopeful that we will continue to see those economic numbers increase. But the reason for that additional $600 per week were, again, to help these people who were going on unemployment for the first time. We were able to do that, and I believe that we were able to help many Americans who lost their job really because of no fault of their own. A second thing we wanted to do during the CARES Act is we wanted to provide money for small businesses. We did this really in two ways. There was a delay in the payroll tax that employers would have to pay. And we also came up with a brand new loan program, the PPP loan, which many small businesses had the opportunity to apply for. In addition to PPP, we had the EIDL loan program, we had the Main Street lending program, and the one that I believe was the most successful was the PPP loan that were issued to small businesses. Again, small businesses having fewer than 500 employees, businesses that applied for that money, if that money is properly spent, can then apply for the loan forgiveness component. But basically would turn these loans, these low interest loans, into grants. And so this was a program that ended up being wildly successful to the point that Congress had to come back and put additional funds into the PPP program to cover all of the demands for larger industries, industries such as our airline industry. As someone who now travels a great deal, I can tell you that back in March and April, the airports were bare. Airlines were continuing their flights, but you would have airline travel. Some of the flights I was on, you may have no more than a dozen people. In some cases, there was only a handful of people, 5 or 6 individuals who were flying on a particular flight during a given day. And we as a nation knew that we must do things to keep industries such as our airline industry solvent. We could not have a situation where all of our major airlines declared bankruptcy at the same time. It would just cripple our economy. And so we tried to make sure that we were stabilizing these larger industries until we saw an uptick in the economy. We also wanted to make sure that we were stabilizing the economy in general by the way of rebate checks. And I believe the rebate checks were also hugely popular as individuals were getting some of their tax dollars back from the federal government. There were some logistic issues with that very early on, as far as individuals who banking or routing numbers were not on file. We had paper checks being mailed. Then we went to having debit cards being mailed to individuals. Our office has worked diligently with people throughout the 3rd District to try to make sure that they are getting those stimulus checks. We still have some outstanding cases that we're working with the IRS to try to help individuals receive those stimulus checks that were supposed to have been sent out back in April. But I will say, as a whole, besides a few lingering cases where we're still trying to work with the IRS on that, that we saw those stimulus checks and that amount of money then being put back into the economy being something that was badly needed at the height of the COVID-19 outbreak. And then finally, there were various assorted things that were in the CARES Act that I thought were vitally important. Money for hospitals. Hospitals were going to be losing traditional sources of resource, traditional sources of income through many, including Mississippi, where we prohibited elective surgery for some period of time in an effort to make sure that we had the hospital capacity to treat COVID-19. We had elective surgeries, which were prohibited in many cases. Even once they came back, many individuals postponed elective surgeries until they felt more comfortable. We knew we were going to have less individuals who were going to be seeking medical care because they were concerned that if they went to see a doctor or went to the hospital, they could possibly be exposed to COVID. So part of the CARES Act set aside $100 billion for our local hospital. We also set aside billions of dollars, I think roughly $16 billion for PPEs, the personal protection equipment. That was something also that we were seeing and hearing, particularly from individuals before everyone had access to a mask. We had medical personnel who did not have access to the mask, the gloves, the aprons, the things that they needed to treat patients and to do so and protect their own health. And so we as a federal government stepped in and provided taxpayer dollars to try to obtain the necessary PPEs and then to distribute those across the country. There was money in there for states. States across our nation received money from the federal government to put toward or to offset some of the costs associated with the COVID-19 response. Mississippi received $1.25 billion from the federal government. And again, the only strings attached were that money was not to be used for new projects, but that money was to be used to offset costs associated with COVID-19. In Mississippi, we were also proud that there was money in there for rural broadband. Rural broadband is something that we have been an advocate for because today the access to high-speed internet has become more and more a necessity. It used to be a luxury. People used to only need high-speed internet if they wanted to watch Netflix or if they had a child in their home who liked to play video games online. But with schools being shut down, with many individuals not going into work but having to work from home, we know that rural broadband is becoming more and more necessary throughout our state and in our community. So we were able to get $100 million to apply to continue to build out rural broadband across our state. And so the CARES Act, the great thing about the CARES Act is it was bipartisan legislation. Republicans, Democrats, the House, the Senate, the administration, all came together and we all began to look and said, look, we need to set aside partisan politics for the purpose of making sure that we are protecting our country in what we knew were going to be difficult economic times. We then came back with what I kind of call the CARES Act 2.0 as we started to see programs such as the PPP program run out of money, as we started to see that there needed to be additional money for the EIDL loan program. We also came back and put additional money into our hospitals and into our testing. And so we came back and we replenished the EIDL loan program. We replenished the PPP program. And we also set aside money for hospitals and testing because, again, we know that, one, it was going to be important to make sure that individuals were receiving tests and that we were quickly or as quickly as possible turning those tests around. And again, we knew the added strain on our healthcare system, so we wanted to make sure that we were caring for our hospitals. I will tell you that it is encouraging, and I know we talked about it just a little bit, to see the fact that our unemployment rate continues to drop. Again, we were at 14.7 in April. We're now just over 10 at 10.2. I'll tell you, 10.2 is still way too high. We've got to do a better job of getting people back to work. We've got to do a better job of reopening our economy. But I do feel that each and every day we're seeing our economy slowly reopen. It is much easier to shut the economy down than it is to reopen. I think we're seeing how difficult it is, particularly with a complex economy like we have in the United States, how difficult it is to restart that economy. But I'll tell you, it is very encouraging to see businesses, to see restaurants, many of them reopening. Now, we know that there are going to be some that will not survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Places that we enjoy going to eat with our family, stores that we enjoy shopping at are ultimately going to close and not reopen. And that is a very unfortunate economic side effect of COVID-19. But we also have businesses who have really thrived in the COVID-19 world. Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, Target. I have an individual who is a good friend of mine who is an owner in a furniture store, and he was telling me that they have done extremely well. An owner of a car lot here in Rankin County who told me that he has sold pretty much every car that he had on his lot and is now having difficulty obtaining new inventory. And so we do know that throughout this time that we have businesses who have done a good job of continuing to function and actually have become more profitable. But we also know that there are other businesses who unfortunately will not survive. Going forward, one of the other things that we have continued to do is we have continued to try to make sure that the government remains functioning, that we are doing the necessary things that we're required to do every year. The House has met. We have passed 10 of 12 spending bills. We've got to make sure that we are funding the government between now and the end of the fiscal year, which will run out here very shortly. There will have to be negotiations between the House and the Senate as far as budgetary issues, spending issues, and those will be ongoing as Congress returns in September. The House is actually going to be returning this week. I will be flying out of Jackson tomorrow, flying to DC, flying back home either Sunday or Monday, depending on how long debate and discussion and votes go. We're going to be voting on legislation dealing with the United States Postal Service. Many of the individuals on this call may have seen or heard something going on with the United States Postal Service, particularly with an increase in the number of mail-in ballots. It is expected that there will be many individuals who will request mail-in ballots. Some states automatically send ballots to registered voters. And there have been discussions as to whether or not the post office can adequately handle the additional mail that will be flowing through the post office. I'll tell you that since the advent of email, of everything that we can now do electronically, the post office has an outdated model as to how it is operating. We continue to see the amount of first-class mail, your letters and things of that nature continues to drop each and every year. Now, what we are seeing is an increase in postal delivery. We see the United States Post Office competing with UPS and FedEx to deliver those packages that we get from Amazon or Walmart or Target and those sorts of things. And so the new Postmaster General came in May of this year and began looking at how the post office was operating. Again, the post office, I believe, has lost roughly $69 billion, and that's billion with a B, over the last decade. And so he began looking at ways in which he could make the post office more efficient, looked at ways in which he could reduce overtime, looked at ways in which he could move some of your mail drop boxes, those blue boxes that we see, and relocate those from areas that had no growth or low growth into higher growth areas where there was going to be more traffic and that those boxes could be used more efficiently. He looked at taking out of service outdated mail processing machines. Again, because of the drop in first-class mail, we didn't need the number of mail processing machines that we had needed previously. And so those were things that the became concerned that those changes that he was implementing may have inadvertently some adverse effect on the delivery of ballots if we saw a large increase in mail ballots in November. The Postmaster General has agreed this week, again, to avoid the appearance of impropriety in that he and/or the administration is attempting to sabotage the election. He has agreed to postpone any future changes. He is going to continue to pay overtime. He's not going to take any of those mail processing machines out of service that have not already been removed. He's not going to relocate any of the mail drop boxes until after the election. The other thing that the Speaker Pelosi would like Congress to do is they would like Congress to allocate an additional $25 billion to the post office. I will tell you right now that the post office currently has cash on hand somewhere between 14 and 15 billion dollars. Even though they are an agency that loses money, they currently have that amount of cash on hand. And they also have access to a $10 billion line of credit. So at any time, the post office has access to already roughly $25 billion. Speaker Pelosi wants to appropriate an additional $25 billion to the U.S. Post Office. I tell you that I don't believe that money is necessary. I don't see any way between now and Election Day, which is about 75 days away, that the United States Post Office can spend $50 billion in addition to revenues that will continue to flow into the post office during these next 75 days. And so we will be returning to Washington for a very short period of time. We will be dealing with the U.S. Post Office, and there will be legislation to possibly for some additional supplemental appropriations. I do expect that legislation will pass the House, but I believe it will be a very partisan vote. I believe that the large majority of Republicans agree, as I do, that the legislation being proposed is unnecessary after the announcement of the post office that he is the Postmaster General, that he is delaying these changes, and based on the current amount of cash on hand, that the additional $25 billion is unnecessary. There's also been talk, and I think some of your members may have heard about what Speaker McConnell has called his skinny stimulus package. The skinny stimulus package is an effort to try to break the logjam between the House and the Senate on what the next stimulus package should look like. The House passed the CARES Act, which was roughly a $3.5 trillion package several weeks ago, if not several months ago. But in that legislation, I believe that were many things that did not necessarily relate to the COVID-19 response. We saw Mitch McConnell in the Senate propose legislation in the range of roughly $1 trillion to try to, again, help continue to bridge the gap and to help Americans as we continue with this economic recovery. There has been ongoing negotiations between the House and the Senate and the administration. So far, those negotiations have been unsuccessful. The Republicans are still looking for a package that's somewhere around $1 trillion, while the Democrats have come down from $3.5 trillion to $2 trillion. But the new plan that has been floated, and we'll see whether or not that plan is able to go forward, would allow for $300 a week in additional federal unemployment. As we saw the $600 expire, we saw the president step in by administrative order and allowed for $400 per week. 300 of that would be paid for by the federal government. The other 100 would be picked up by the states. Some of the states have said that because of their financial situation that they don't have the funds necessary to pick up that extra $100 a week. So this plan would put $300 a week with no additional requirements by the state in that unemployment, again, to help people through this particular time. The plan would add over $100 billion to our schools. Roughly 2/3 of that funding would go to fund our elementary and high schools. 28%, as I recall, of the proposed plan at this point would go toward colleges and junior colleges, and then there would be an additional 5% that would be left to spend at the discretion of the governors. But again, one of the things that is vitally important as we look at returning to some sense of normal, as we look at reopening the economy, is getting our kids back in school, but getting our kids back in school safely. I had the honor and the privilege to serve on the Rankin County School Reopening Task Force. I have one son that has graduated from the Rankin County Public School System. I have a second son who is now a junior in the school system. And so I had the opportunity to join other community leaders, people from the medical community, as we sat down and tried to develop options and plans on what school would look like here in our community going forward. I will tell you that almost two-person, the overwhelming goal was to ultimately get to a point where we could have traditional learning again, where we could have kids going back to school Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock, learning in the classroom, that one-on-one interaction with their teachers. We feel is vitally important, but we also understand that we've got to balance that with the safety of our children, the safety of our teachers, and the safety of our administrators. That we can't just send kids back into school in an unsafe environment. And so we began looking at things such as mask policies, looking at things such as temperature checks, looking at various options for schools. We had the enhanced traditional where kids would go to school 5 days a week. We had kind of a hybrid where kids would go to school two days a week, and then we would do online learning for 3. And then we had the third option, which was just strictly online learning. I will tell you that our school district, after much discussion, much consultation, went with 2 options. One is they've opened schools in a hybrid format. My son currently goes to school on Mondays and Thursdays. On Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, he is learning online. The other half of the school goes to school. He goes Monday, Thursday, so the other half goes Tuesday, Friday. So then that limits the number of people on campus at one time. It allows for social distancing. And then on Wednesdays and on the weekends, it allows for the school to be deep cleaned. So if someone does happen to come into school that is COVID positive, hopefully the school will be clean before students return. We also had decided to have an option to allow all parents that wanted to go online. So if you felt like that it was not safe to send your kids to school, you could, no questions asked, now learn online. And so 5 days a week, those parents that have chosen that for their children are able to, by way of Zoom, by way of Skype, by way of many of these virtual meeting platforms, they're able to continue to learn at home. But this is something that we have to continue to work with, and the federal government has a role in that. And this skinny plan that McConnell has proposed would give $100 billion toward that. Again, much of that money, 2/3 going toward our grade schools, toward our high schools, 2/3 of it going toward our universities and our community college system. A couple of other things that would be included in that is there would be roughly $26 billion for development and the rollout of a possible vaccine. I will tell you, each and every day we're getting information that we are one step closer to being able to have a vaccine. I know that Russia has announced that they have a vaccine. I've not seen any real information on that. I would be very reluctant for me or any of my family to take a Russian-made vaccine that really has no testing that I know of to stand behind it. But we've seen both in the U.S. and in Europe, we've seen companies that are on the final trial stages of vaccines that appear to be very promising. You've got Moderna has recently announced that they're in the final trial stages. I know that there is a vaccine being developed by the United Kingdom that also is in the final testing stages, and both of those appear to be very promising. And so what we want to do is we want to continue as a federal government, we want to continue to invest, we want to continue to work with private businesses to develop a vaccine. But then once those vaccines become available, once they've been proven to be safe, we want to be able to very quickly roll out the ability to vaccinate as many individuals as quickly as possible across our country. I think we've all heard about I guess what we would consider to be a worst case scenario where we have a bad seasonal flu that comes about the same time as we have a second round of or a second outbreak of COVID-19 cases. The concern there is that it overwhelms our healthcare system. So the quicker we can develop a vaccine for COVID-19, the quicker we can roll that out, get that vaccine into the hands or into the bodies of United States citizens, and then ultimately distribute that vaccine across the world, the better off we're going to be. The better off we're going to be. We're going to save lives. We're going to then allow the economy to completely reopen. And so we want to make sure we are continuing to put money aside for that. And this new bill would allow for $26 billion additional dollars to go toward research and development, and to begin setting forth the foundation, if you will, so that we can quickly roll out that vaccine here at home. Some of the things that the bill does not include, it does not include an additional stimulus check. That's something, again, that while wildly popular in the CARES Act, this new plan by Senator McConnell does not include that. It does include liability protections, and that's something that I've tried to talk a great deal about. A huge concern of mine is that going forward, we will see individuals seek to file lawsuits against businesses, against healthcare facilities, if they have contracted COVID-19. And I believe that as long as businesses are acting in good faith, that they're doing everything within their power to prevent the spread of COVID-19, that they should not be subject to what in many cases may be frivolous lawsuits. I don't want to see trial lawyers have class action lawsuits against many of our businesses that would force them to spend hundreds, if not thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees in a time in which they're already struggling. And so this is something that would be included in the legislation. And there would also be an attempt in the legislation to reopen the PPP program. Again, we talked about that program being successful. That program has officially closed. I think it closed last week for the acceptance of new applications, but there's still unallocated funds in the PPP program. And so this legislation would reopen that and would reopen that program to certain groups that were before were excluded. Some of those groups that we're pushing for would be hospital associations, a larger hospital association that controls smaller hospitals, or the smaller hospitals are part of a larger hospital association. We would like to see those individual standalone hospitals that are part of an association be eligible for the PPP program. Again, we think it makes sense, particularly in Mississippi, where we have smaller rural hospitals, that we're putting funding into those hospitals so that they can continue to keep their doors open and they can continue to treat people in their community. And so those are things that we are continuing to look at, continuing to move forward. One of the things that I know your association has recently been dealing with, and something that we've been talking to your national association and your local group, would be the 50 basis point increase that Fannie and Freddie announced just over a week ago. We know that, and we believe that increase at this time would have a negative effect. It would have a negative effect on both borrowers and lenders. On lenders, it would have a negative effect on loans where you have already locked in an interest rate but were unable to close those loans before September the 1st. On borrowers, it's going to have a negative impact on any borrower that is unable to close their loan between now and September the 1st. Once your association made us aware of this issue, we've done several things. We've reached out to the Financial Services Committee in the House. We've reached out to similar committees on the Senate side. We're trying to gather information from Freddie and Fannie as to, one, why they feel that this increase is necessary. Then we want to know where you come up with the 50 basis points. We know that in the 2008 financial crisis, it was only a 25 basis point. So here we are having a doubling effect now in a time in which we're seeking to stimulate the economy. We're seeking to make sure that there are additional funds that we are able to put back in the economy. And so we're trying to determine and get information from Fannie and Freddie as to where they came up with the 50 basis points. We're trying to get information of where this September 1st deadline came from. We believe that this is an arbitrary deadline. We believe that the deadline is almost impossible to be met. And so we're asking questions as it relates to the September 1st deadline. And then we also are asking questions as to what impact this 50 basis point increase will have both on the mortgage market and the economy as a whole. And so those are things that we want to have answers to. I will tell you that there will be legislation that will be introduced later this week in Congress that would prohibit Freddie and Fannie from being able to implement this 50 basis point increase. This is going to be legislation that's going to be led by the Republicans, many of which are which serve on the Financial Services Committee. We're hopeful that this will be something that we can get the Speaker to take up. But we also hope that Fannie and Freddie will see that by these inquiries, by the fact that there's proposed legislation, that we can get them to step back, that we can get them to postpone any additional increases, a 50-point increase in the 50 basis point increase and the refinance until they get us the information that we've asked for, that we can study it, that we can determine whether or not that we feel that their increase is it necessary, is it appropriate, and then when would be the right time if we do feel like that there needs to be an increase, when would be the right time for that to be implemented. And so we are very optimistic, and I'm not making any promises, but we're optimistic that this may not go into effect on September 1st as they have announced. I will tell you that there is becoming a growing interest on Capitol Hill, both by Republicans and Democrats, to get this information, to allow us to have the chance to study it before this goes into effect. And so I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful that this won't be something that we will see happening on September the 1st, that the rates will not be affected by this proposed change at that point. And again, if we feel like that there is a need for a refinance fee, that we can look at it, see what the right figure is, and again, when the right time to implement that. And I don't believe now, as we continue to struggle to recover economically, that now is the right time to impose those changes. Just on a personal note, and I know we'll take a few minutes for questions, I do just want to thank everyone for allowing me the opportunity to serve as one of the 4 members of Congress from Mississippi. It has been a great honor. I've had the opportunity to represent our state now for a year and a half in Washington. I will tell you that it has been a tremendous learning experience. Prior to being elected to Congress, I served almost 25 years as a prosecutor here in the Metro Jackson area for Madison and Rankin County. After taking this job, I have had to expand my wealth of knowledge from outside just things related to the criminal justice system to now really a little bit of everything, whether it be healthcare, whether it be the economy, whether it be banking and finance, whether it be some of the committees I serve on, foreign affairs, homeland security, or ethics. I am only able to do these things because I'm blessed to have an incredible staff. I believe that that individuals are only as good as the people that they surround themselves with. And so I have been blessed to have an incredible staff, both in Washington, D.C. I know many members of the Mortgage Bankers Association probably have had an opportunity to speak to either Elizabeth Joseph or Bubba White or Jordan Downs on my staff. They do a lot of our legislative work, but I also have a great staff here in the district. And our district staff works day to day to meet the needs of the people of Mississippi. And so when we have individuals who have issues with the federal government where they need somebody to advocate and step in on their behalf, my staff does that each and every day. And again, I can't thank them enough for that. So I will turn it back over to you, Matt. And I'm sorry if I went a little long.
Not at all, Congressman. That was a wealth of knowledge and some great information. And I know that personally, I think I speak for everybody on this call, we really appreciate your and your colleagues' help with the Freddie and Fannie increase, because that is something that did blindside our industry and something that we're hoping to be able to continue the service to give to the borrower and maintain our community lending responsibilities that we take so serious. So thank you for all your help. I know that you have a very tight timeline. So the questions that we received, we're going to submit to your office. And I just have one. We have an unofficial motto, I guess, in the Mortgage Bankers Association. It's we're all a family. However, we're a family of competitors. So I think it caught a lot of people's eye when your biography went out, and you became the first Republican freshman in the 116th Congress to pass a bill in the House. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
We'd be happy to, and that's one of the accomplishments that we're very proud of. I will tell you that when you're in the minority, particularly a freshman in the minority, it is sometimes very difficult to get legislation passed through the House. But we were able to get a piece of legislation passed through first out of the Homeland Security Committee, and then off the House floor. It later went to the Senate, where it passed the Senate and then was signed into law by the president. But it's the Terrorist and Foreign Fighters Travel Exercise Act. And what it does is it creates an exercise within Homeland Security, particularly with TSA and other agencies, who are responsible for making sure that our air travel is safe. What we don't want is another 9/11 where we have individuals who are able to use our airlines as weapons of mass destruction. And so we have seen great improvements within TSA since 9/11. I think we've all seen the screening that we have to go through and the increase in that. But there's also a great deal of intelligence gathering that goes on, where TSA is constantly running people's names as they are booking flights, as they are arriving at the airport against known terrorist watch lists and things of that nature. And so this particular legislation would create those exercises that would require those agencies to work together, both TSA, Homeland Security, the FBI, and other federal agencies, to work together to make sure that if there are any deficiencies, that we identify those deficiencies and correct those as quickly as possible. I will have to say that the congressman from the 2nd Congressional District, Benny Thompson, who's also a good friend of mine, he is chairman of the Homeland Committee in the House. He was able to help us navigate the bill through the House, so I've got to give him some credit as well for helping us be able to get a Republican bill out of a democratically controlled committee, and then also helping make sure that the Speaker brought the bill up for a vote. But I'm very proud of that. Again, it is a staff effort. This was legislation that my staff came up with, that we talked through, that we worked through the language of the legislation. And again, this is a team effort that hopefully we'll see that our country continues to remain safe, particularly our air travel.
Well, it sounds like it's not only great legislation, but again, it's always good to see Mississippi in the #1 spot. So congratulations on that. Congressman, thank you again for your time, for all the information. We know that you have a packed schedule, so we really appreciate it. And I just want to let you know that, we know that there's so many issues facing our nation right now. And whether it's the mortgage or all the other topics that you talked about, there's a lot of people that have you and our other leaders in our thoughts and prayers as y'all make these decisions to help our country move forward. So again, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much, and just encourage you and your association, your membership, to continue to reach out to us as issues pop up, so that we can continue to advocate on your behalf. And thank you again for all that you do.
Thank you, Congressman. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Well, I hope everyone figured out, I've found that as informative as I did. Today, we were sponsored by Ms. Kim Hollingsworth with Radiance, so I was going to let her come on and have a couple minutes to speak to us.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Kim. I really appreciate the opportunity to sponsor the webinar today. Just wanted to make sure you guys are all aware that Fannie and Freddie Mac recently increased income limits on the Home Ready and Home Possible programs. And the really good news is most counties across the U.S. are seeing an increase in area median income. And I know specifically in Mississippi, over 92% of the counties in Mississippi do have an increase in area median income, on average about $2,663. Probably in some counties you'll see a higher increase and some may be a little bit lower. But if you're interested, be sure and check the eligibility maps to see changes in your particular lending footprint. And hopefully this will allow you to qualify more borrowers who otherwise wouldn't be able to qualify. And if you guys need any refresher on these programs, just let me know. I'd be glad to do that for you. But thanks again, Matt, for letting me sponsor today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim. We can't do this with our affiliates, and we really appreciate you taking the time and, again, sponsoring it today. I believe we have a door prize, but before we do that, I just have one announcement. As we all heard, the Congressman and his colleagues are trying to kind of walk back or try to get the Fannie and Freddie 50 basis points, walk back a little bit. We are going to send out the mortgage call to action again today. If you would please just take a second to complete that. I believe I saw something that we've already sent over 100 letters to the senators and to the representatives. So if you would please, we're going to send that out today and tomorrow. If you have not had a chance to fill it and complete that, if you would please do so, it'll be greatly appreciated. We are making a difference. We just got to keep the pressure on our leaders. So again, thank you today for joining. And Caitlin, if you want to go ahead and do the door prize.
All right, our winner today is Macy Carney. So I'll reach out to Macy and get her information, and Radian will be sending you a door prize.
Congratulations,
Congratulations, Macy.
And again, thank you everyone for joining our meeting today, and look out for our emails coming soon about our September meeting. Thank you. Have a great day.